This meeting of the Community Development Board is called to order on December 20, 2022. Welcome, everyone. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
What you do? United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This board consists of 7 members and 1 alternate who are appointed by the City Council and serve voluntarily. I'm Mary Lau, and I will ask the other members and staff to introduce themselves, beginning on my left.
Mike Flannery. Jay Daniel, attorney to the board.
Rosemary Call, City Clerk.
Lauren Matzke, Planning and Development.
Matthew Midge, Assistant City Attorney.
Tina Clayton, Planning and Development.
Samuel Hutkin.
Bruce Rector.
Andy Park.
John Kortraki.
Please remember to turn off your cell phones so that they do not become a distraction during the meeting. Please also refrain from having conversations in this room so that we might hear all of the testimony given today. To ensure a complete record of this board's actions, we ask that each individual wishing to speak, including the applicant, speak into the microphone at the podium in front of us, clearly state your name and spell your last name for the clerk. Now I will ask all those in attendance today who plan to speak to please rise and be sworn in by the clerk.
Do you swear to or affirm to tell the truth throughout your entire testimony?
I do.
Agendas of today's meeting are on the podium to your left near the entry door. Also on this podium are a roster of the Community Development Board, the list of city staff experts and their resumes, the board's rules of procedure, and the annual schedule of this board. Our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes from last month's meeting. May I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
I move we approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, our next item is an opportunity for citizens to be heard on any matter that is not on today's agenda. Okay, I apologize for that. Thank you. My voice doesn't carry very well, and I'll try to lean a little closer to the microphone. Thank you. Is there anyone present who would like to address some matter that is not on today's agenda? Please come forward if there is anyone. All right. Mr. Daniel, should I take up the request for items to be continued before the consent agenda?
Yeah, you would take up your items to be continued, which is item E1 on your agenda, first reading the level 3 procedures. Do that, then we'll move to the consent agenda.
All right. So I should go ahead and review the level 3 instructions. All right.
Madam Chair, we did have a couple extra items we wanted to add to the consent agenda, so I didn't know when we would go about continuing that.
All right. Are you talking about the items that we're moving to the January meeting?
Yes.
Correct.
Right. All right. Well, we'll review the level 3.
Those are presently shown on the agenda, but you wish to move them, continue them to the next item. Let's raise those when we get to the consent agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
City staff can make their request at that time.
All right. What we have remaining on the agenda are level 3 cases, several of them. All level 3 cases, such as a plan amendment, rezoning, or development agreement, are considered legislative hearings. The Community Development Board reviews the application, the staff report, correspondence, and all evidence presented today, and makes a recommendation to the City Council. For level 3 applications, the City Council makes the final decision. The procedure for all level 3 cases is as follows. Presentation by the planning staff, 10 minutes maximum. Presentation by the applicant, 10 minutes maximum. Comments by the public, 3 minutes per person. Closing remarks by the planning and development staff, 3 minutes maximum. Closing remarks by the applicant, 3 minutes maximum. Closing the public hearing, discussion and vote by the board. We do have a number of items on our consent agenda. The board has adopted a consent agenda.
Before you do that, you have a continued item, so that continued item needs to be handled prior to the consent agenda.
All right. We have an item on the agenda that was held over from last month's meeting. That is case TA 2022-09001, proposed amendments to the Community Development Code. We have received another request from the city to postpone this one to the January 17th meeting. Any discussion?
I'm available if there's questions, but I respectfully request that this be continued to January.
All right. Is there a motion to move this item to the January 17th, 2023 board meeting?
I move to continue case TA 2022-09001 to the January 17, 2023 Community Development Board meeting.
All right.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The board has adopted a consent agenda format, and the consent items are identified as such on the agenda. Consent agenda items are those items for which the Planning and Development Department recommends approval. The applicant is in agreement with any proposed conditions, and no written objections to the case have been received to date. Items may be removed from the consent agenda today by a member of the board, a member of the staff, or any person in the audience for questions or objections. I'll read each item on the consent agenda, and if any person wishes to remove this item from the consent agenda, please so state or raise your hand, and we will remove it. Items removed from the consent agenda will be heard in the regular order of the meeting. Items that remain on the consent agenda will be approved with a single vote. I note that we have a request to postpone two of the items on today's consent agenda to the January 17th, 2023 meeting. That would be case CPA 2022-10002, amendments to the comprehensive plan related to the Parks and Recreation Impact Fee, and item number 4, case TA 2022-10002, proposed amendments to the Community Development Code related to the Parks and Recreation Impact Fee. Is there a motion to grant the request to postpone these two items to the next meeting?
I move to continue case CPA 2022-10002, item number 3 in our consent agenda, and item number 4 in our consent agenda, case TA 2022-10002, to the January 17th, 2023 Community Development Board meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? These items will be moved to the January 17th meeting. All right, we have two remaining items on our consent agenda. Number 1 is case FLD 2014-12034A at 325 South Gulfview Boulevard. The owner is Beach Rock Lodging LLP. The agent is Catherine Cole, Hill Warden Henderson. The location is a 1.6-acre property bound by South Gulfview Boulevard, Coronado Drive, and generally at the western terminus of Brightwater Drive. The board is reviewing an amendment to an approved Level 2 flexible development application, which was case FLD 2014-12034, for the construction of a 180-unit hotel, utilizing an additional 100 units allocated from the Hotel Density Reserve through Beach by Design as currently approved within the tourist district for the property at 325 South Gulfview Boulevard. The amendment includes a reduction in height from 140 feet to 100 feet and revised architectural drawings. No other changes are proposed. This project continues to propose a minimum of 216 off-street parking spaces and requests allowable flexibility from height and a 2-year development order. Is there anyone present who would like to remove this item from today's consent agenda? Seeing none, the next case is a Level 3 case, case CPA 2022-10001, proposed amendments to the comprehensive plan related to water supply. The applicant is the City of Clearwater Planning and Development Department. The board is reviewing a request to amend the City of Clearwater's comprehensive plan to address the city's potable water supply facilities work plan and making a recommendation to the city council. Is there anyone present who wishes to remove this item from today's consent agenda? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
Separately, Jay?
Yes, and it's separate.
We'll have a motion to address the level 2 application, item 1 on today's consent agenda.
I move to approve item number 1, case FLD 2014-12034A on today's consent agenda based on the evidence of the record, including the application and the staff report. I hereby adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law stated in the staff report with conditions of approval as listed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item 1 is approved. Is there a motion for the level 3 case that is item 2 on today's consent agenda?
Do it. I'll
I
take it.
move to approve item number 2 on the consent agenda, case CPA 2022-1001, amendments to the comprehensive plan related to water supply. Based on evidence in the record, including the application and the staff report, and hereby adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law stated in the staff reports with conditions of approval as listed.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Right, the item is approved.
I had a quick
The
question.
board will be making a recommendation of approval to the city council.
Okay.
The board can't exceed its authority by motion.
Our agenda reflects the director's items before the remaining level 3 case.
Well, actually, for clarification, this is a CRA plan, which is not a level 3 case, but by statute, the local planning agency must make a recommendation to city council on this matter. So we're very pleased today to present to you the long-awaited North Greenwood CRA plan. We have Jamie Lotko, our long-range manager, who's going to present it. We also have representatives from the Clearwater Urban Leadership Coalition, as well as our new CRA director, Dr. Jay Matthews. So if you have any questions, I'm sure any of these people can help.
All right.
All right. Good afternoon. Jamie Lopko for the record for Planning and Development. Very happy to be here today to present to you the North Greenwood Community Redevelopment Area Plan. The agenda for what we're going to go through is pretty lengthy, but I'm going to tell you about what is a Community Redevelopment Area Plan, or a CRA. What do you need to create that plan? Where are we at in that process? And then we'll do some look at the existing conditions of the North Greenwood area, which is what prompted the need for the CRA plan. The public engagement we went through, the vision of the plan, and then really the meat of the plan is its implementation. So we'll spend a lot of time there making sure we agree with the strategies that we put forward. We'll cover the governance and appendices, and then the timeline moving forward for this approval. So what is a CRA? A community redevelopment area has two purposes. It's used to direct tax revenue to a specific geographic area to address issues like blight, inadequate infrastructure, brownfields, and vacancy through incentivizing redevelopment. Secondly, it can be a planning mechanism to have people and place-based strategies to improve economics and housing. So what do we need to do to create a CRA? The Florida Redevelopment Agency says we need to do three things. We need to adopt our findings of necessity study, which was done by the city in August of 2020. We need to develop and adopt a community redevelopment plan, which is why we're here today. And then we need to create a redevelopment trust fund. And that is something done at the city council level, so it will be done concurrently with the plan when it goes to city council. And just wanted to note on this map, this is the map that we use in the findings and necessity study to try and determine what areas we wanted to narrow down for the CRA. And so it's included within the plan as well, just to note that we started with 6 sub-areas, and only 5 of them were actually eligible to participate in the CRA. And what we narrowed it down to was the blue, the purple, and the green, which is kind of diagonally left into the center of the plan, and that's really what the boundaries will look like. And here we have the actual boundary of the CRA, in which it is bounded on your east by Kings Highway, and then on your south by Palmetto and down to the CSX, and then down to Jones. And on your west, we have the harbor, and then up Osceola and into Alt 19. And then on the north side, we have Stevenson Creek, as well as Sunset Point Road. So that's really the boundaries of the CRA that were determined. So our findings of necessity study, what did it tell us? It told us several things. The area of the CRA, it has a higher occurrence of fire, EMS, and police calls than the rest of the city. It also has a higher occurrence of code violations than the rest of the city. Other things that we identified were there's a prevalence of poverty. Households are spending more than 35% of their income on housing, which means they're cost burdened. And then housing is in substandard conditions, and there are lower median incomes as well as lower home values in this area. So I'm going to spend the next several slides going over what are the existing conditions there. This is just a bunch of factual information that we took from the 2020 American Community Survey 5-year estimates. We have one thing that came from the actual 2020 census, and that is the population of 6,619 residents. The rest of the data wasn't available at that time, so it's based on the American Community Survey. So we have a median income of $35,277, and that means 27% of the area is below the poverty rate. Median home value is $219,000, and 48% of the households in the area are cost burdened. And what that means is they spend more than 30% of their income on housing, which is your rent or your mortgage, your utilities, and any association fees that go along with that. A couple other data points in employment. The majority of residents work outside of the CRA. We have 16% of the households who don't have a car in order to get to work. And then we have this little table up there, and that's looking at the public health conditions that occur. And you can see all of the items in red are areas that occur higher in the CRA than the city, the state, the county, or nationally. So we have a lot of health concerns in those areas. This slide will focus on physical aspects. We have various parks, recreation facilities, and community centers available to the residents in North Greenwood. We've got the North Greenwood Recreation Aquatic Complex, the Martin Luther King Jr. Community Center, Cherry Harris and Walter C. Campbell Parks, and a Seminole Boat Ramp. There are many cultural, community, and historic places in the community. We have the library, 3 schools, over a dozen churches, and several health centers to serve the residents. This slide will focus more on our zoning use and public ownership in the CRA. As you can see, it's predominantly our residential uses and zoning and land use in this area, lots of small parcels of single-family homes. It also includes 40 acres of unincorporated area. And that's the hatched area that you can see up next to the pink parcel. There's a big chunk right there. The remainder of this map shows you our public and semi-public owned properties. And there are 64 parcels in this area that are owned by the city of Clearwater. And that varies from parks and recreation facilities, a fire station, library, and some vacant properties. Pinellas County owns several small parcels, and those are the pink parcels. The city's parcels are the light blue. And then Pinellas County Schools owns a couple of large purple parcels. Those are the schools and the Curtis Museum. I wanted to touch on the environmental because it can be a positive and a negative in the area. We have the coastal high hazard and coastal storm areas, and that's going to impact our areas along the harbor and Stevenson Creek and its tributaries. And this basically will place restrictions for multiple agencies on properties within those areas because of potential flooding or storm-related hazards. But on the other hand, we also have Stevenson Creek and many wetlands. Those offer habitat for animals, vegetated areas that can reduce flooding, but also support recreational opportunities. Now, the streets are generally in a grid pattern owned by the state, county, and city, and there's a couple of private roads in there. There are sidewalks along at least one side of every road, a couple of bike lanes on the Pinellas Trail to offer bike and pedestrian movement. And we also have the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority, PSTA. They offer 3 routes in the area, as well as the Jolly Trolley to assist with transit between both within and to areas outside the CRA. And our utilities and infrastructure are readily available throughout the CRA with the exception of the unincorporated areas. So our public engagement. We went into a thorough public engagement campaign. We have a website that's dedicated to the CRA. At the beginning of the process, we sent out postcards to all the residents of the area, encouraging them to get involved, encouraging them to come to one of the 4 public workshops that we held throughout the process. We had a youth engagement event at the rec center. We had a faith leadership roundtable, and we also had a social media campaign to continue to try and keep people involved as much as possible. In addition, we had a technical and a steering committee involved with the process. The technical committee included members from Fort Pinellas, Pinellas County, PSTA, and various city departments. The steering committee was made up of members of the North Greenwood community and had representatives from our Clearwater Urban Leadership Coalition, business owners, faith-based community, nonprofit and community organizations, industry and development, and other neighborhood representatives. So based on that public engagement, we had a good bit of feedback. But some broad topics that came up were a desire for poverty reduction and economic and redevelopment opportunities, to focus higher intensity development in the Old Bay District along the harbor, to focus on our Martin Luther King corridor, to bring that back as the center of the community, to consider programs for renovation and rehabilitation of existing homes within the area, a need for increased connection throughout the community to the trail to Stevenson Creek, increased access to recreation facilities like Walter C. Campbell and other recreation fields after school or on weekends, and a need for better coordination among existing nonprofits to make sure they're better meeting the needs of the community. So we took this information and came up with our vision. This vision was shared with the steering community as well as the community in a public workshop. And so we narrowed it down to North Greenwood will flourish as a vibrant community where social and economic equity is prioritized to eliminate poverty and enhance the quality of life for all. The success of North Greenwood will be achieved through people-based solutions, academic excellence, the improvement of existing infrastructure, and the creation of new spaces that will foster a thriving, sustainable future. And so that will lead us into the actual plan development. We came up with 5 chapters and 4 appendices, and we'll go over each one of those. And I will stop at that point because that was a lot of background information and CRA information, and see if there's any questions at that point, and then further we'll stop at other points for you to be able to ask questions. So I just wanted to make sure that on the background, factual information of how we got here, are there any questions? All right, we'll move right into it. So the plan implementation chapter will cover our tax increment financing, or TIF, projections, the funding recommendations, emphasis area recommendations, and the actual CRA implementation. And so I will pause after each one of those sections to give you the opportunity to ask questions or comment. So the first one is our TIF projections. We have to create a trust fund that will hold the funding, which will be the tax revenue collected over the 20-year period of this plan. And so the TIF projections in this plan are based on the current city and county millage rates with no special tax districts. So if any of that changes, the TIF revenue will be impacted. It is projected that if approved, the city and county will contribute 95% of the property tax revenue to this project, as long as the city commits to spending 50% of the total TIF on 3 county priority areas. And we'll cover that in the next section so you understand what those 3 priorities areas are. And I will note that TIF revenue is restricted on how it is spent and is more focused on capital improvements and more place-based things. And so the TIF projection table, this is actually what's included within the plan, and it covers every 5 years. So you'll see that there's a starting point of the current property value of the CRA, as well as the current tax that's put in there. Now, this is based on our 2021 property taxes because the 2022 is not available at this point. The intent is to base this plan on the 2022 tax year, so these numbers may change slightly. So the table shows that we have a starting tax value, and there's a projected standard growth in property value of 3% each year. Additionally, we're anticipating a development in the Old Bay District. So we have added a value of about $100 million over years 6 through 12 to accommodate that additional value in there to make sure that we're projecting the appropriate amount of TIF in the area. So with that standard increase, as well as the development, we're projecting that we will have just over $30 million in the TIF over the 30-year period. Now we'll go over how that TIF is spent in the next section. But the TIF projections itself, are there any questions on that and how we've come up with that? Yes, sir.
TIF, tax, what's that for?
Tax increment financing.
Thank you.
So it's, if I understand it correctly, it's the increase in tax base
Yes.
from the existing, right? We're using this 2022 to be used as the basis,
Yes.
and for the increases for improvements and renovations and things of that goes back into that district.
Right, whatever the base tax is now will continue to go to the city and the county, but whatever increased tax revenue that there is will go into the trust fund and be used solely for items from this plan.
Anyone else? All right, thank you.
All right, so now we get into the actual expenditures. I mentioned earlier the three priority characters, areas, and those are affordable housing, economic development, and employment and mobility. And that's what the county has identified as the three priorities where we have to spend at least 50% of the total tax increment financing in order to qualify for the 95% that we would get. And so as you can see in the table on the slide indicates how we're going to split up that $30 million in those different categories. And so keep in mind that the TIF dollars are going to be spent more on place-based strategies. So we have under affordable housing as a large chunk of the funding, but we're going to focus more on small infill development and renovation and rehabilitation projects. It's not the intent to create a new large-scale apartment complex or anything out there. This is more focusing on small-scale infill development. Under economic development, we're going to focus on attracting new businesses to the area. We need to create some employment opportunities within the CRA so they don't have to travel outside the CRA for jobs, as well as the youth did mention that they would like to stay where they are, but they feel like they don't have any opportunities here. So we want to make sure we're creating more opportunities in the CRA. And lastly is under mobility. It's focused on improving our walking and biking infrastructure to connect the community and improve access to transit. And there's still also a small portion of the funds put towards administering the CRA itself. Yes, sir.
I may be wrong, Tom. Why is the administration, seems high, there must be a reason, I'm not sure you're ready for it, it's about 15%. What does that entail? Why is it, what's the administration involved that costs that much?
It really pays for the staff because we have our own community redevelopment agency staff with here in the part of the city, and that will assist them in actually administering. You'll see when we get into the actual implementation, there is a project lead assigned to that, and a good bit of these will be assigned to the CRA staff to be able to execute these programs. So it's a lot of staff time in creating these programs, developing the partnerships, and then also executing some of the programs that we have in place.
So this mostly goes to city staff, not to some outside consultant?
Yes.
And how many years is this over?
20.
Thank you.
All right, so our second expenditure is our American Rescue Plan Act, or our ARPA funds. And since the accrual of TIF funds is going to take several years before we get a large amount of funds in place, the city has allocated $5 million of its ARPA funding for the North Greenwood CRA. So these funds are going to be available right away and without restriction. And these are going to focus more on our people-based strategies since the TIF may not be eligible to be used on those. And our ARPA funds have to be allocated by the end of 2024 and spent by the end of 2026. So the table on the slide will show you where we have our $5 million in ARPA funds proposed under 6 goal categories that we've created within the plan. But almost half of the funding you'll see is allocated towards our poverty reduction. We heard from the community again and again how important that was to address the poverty situation within the community. So we have a large chunk of the funding towards our poverty reduction. And then we'll get into the CRA implementation table, and that will give us the details on the actual specifics of where the TIF dollars, where the ARPA dollars will actually be spent. This is kind of the generalities, just telling you these are what the 2 funding sources are, these are how they can be spent, and the general topics that we're going over with them. So are there any questions on the 2 different funding recommendations or mechanisms?
To the extent it says that these funds must be expended by the end of 2026, is that an ARPA requirement?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so we're moving to our emphasis area. During one of our workshops, we did a mapping exercise that we asked the community to identify paths, edges, nodes, districts, and landmarks in the North Greenwood area. And so we gathered that information and created these emphasis areas to create this diagrammatic plan, which is one of the requirements of a CRA plan. And so each of these areas is described within the plan, and there's recommendations related to possible land use and design standards as well as redevelopment opportunities. We have a couple of the areas that did not have any changes or opportunities identified, but there were several that had multiple opportunities, and so we're going to look at a couple of those briefly. Area A is our North Ward School and Seminole Boat Ramp area. And so we definitely have an opportunity related to the reuse of the North Ward School, as well as additional recreation amenities or connection to the Clearwater Harbor in that area. Area B is our corridors of North Fort Harrison and North Myrtle. Those are major commercial corridors, and the focus in there will be on land use and design changes to catalyze redevelopment of the properties, whether it be commercial, residential, or mixed use. And Area E is our North Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue corridor. That's the historic center of the community. And so the focus in that area is going to be redevelopment and revitalization and possible infill development. And just wanted to mention that the city also has just received a grant from Forward Pinellas to conduct a design charrette specifically for the North Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue corridor to look at the corridor for redevelopment opportunities and what possible land use or design standards that we should look at changing to accommodate what the community really desires in that corridor. And so we're anticipating that will start in February. Any questions about that piece? All right, now we're going to move into the actual implementation. And so since this is the big table in the document that we'll have all of the strategies, I'm going to go through each one of them individually. So we'll start with the CIP, and then each one of the goal categories, we will look at them individually to make sure that we understand all the strategies and see if there's any questions related to any of those goal categories. So we'll start with our capital improvement projects. We have 9 projects identified, including improvements, connections, and placemaking opportunities on our sidewalks and along the Pinellas Trail. We have a redesign of the North Fort Harrison Avenue to encourage active transportation. And then we have park improvements at our shuffleboard and lawn bowling complex, as well as Overbrook and North Betty Lane parks. So when it comes to the capital improvement program portion of our recommendations, are there any questions related to that?
I have a question. The proposed redesign of Fort Harrison Avenue, we've previously had presentations regarding the potential redesign of portions of Fort Harrison that are south of this area. Is this going to be interfaced in some kind of way? Are you working with that group?
I don't know. Do you know?
Yes, it will.
Okay,
Saw it in the complete streets plan.
right, okay.
Just amplify on that, right now there's those loopy-doopy in and out things along North Fort Harrison. So I want to ask what you learned from that, but that's the type of thing you'll be feeding into it.
It will be evaluated, yes.
Thank you. That's a technical term.
Okay. All right, so now we'll move into the CRA plan goals. We have public safety as our first goal area, and it has covered 12 strategies covered, including several that are to continue to build relationships with our Clearwater Police and Fire departments through education, mentoring, and training programs. Then we have a couple other strategies about developing a grant program to assist with interior and exterior improvements with blighted properties, continuing to organize our cleanup days in the community, and then installing additional lighting along sidewalks and trails. And so that's the public safety portion of the strategies we've recommended here. Are there questions about that or comments? All right, we'll roll right into mobility. Mobility has 5 strategies, including opportunities to increase or expand our existing transit services, a look at our on-street parking to see if there's opportunities there, adding shade or amenities along our sidewalks and trails, and then solutions to improve our bicycle and pedestrian safety, including possibly looking at a Safe Routes to School program. So any questions or comments on mobility?
Are you planning significant changes to the Pinellas Trail as part of this?
It's not beyond the realm, but I know that we've looked at it, it's underutilized at this point, and definitely looking at ways to probably throw in some placemaking or some more maybe benches or something to draw more use of it, getting the commercial properties to somehow utilize it or optimize it, whether we put bike racks in place there, but definitely it's going to be a focus of the area to try to make sure that we're utilizing it better than we are. All right, oops, do that one. We were still on poverty reduction. Sorry about that. Poverty reduction has 10 strategies, including the development of a neighborhood-scale workforce development program, as well as expanding the hours of our North Greenwood Library to support our workforce development. Other strategies are a grant program to assist with the improvement of commercial buildings, establishing new businesses, and reducing blight along the Martin Luther King corridor. Creating an emergency fund to assist with low-income residents with one-time costs that would prevent them from going to work. And developing mentoring and apprenticeship programs to give residents the knowledge to begin to resolve their own problems. So are there any questions about our poverty reduction?
So the Create Business Workforce Development and Mentoring, is that going to be through, is that expanding what Terry Jones is already doing over there with his programs, or is this going to be a supplement to that?
I think it will probably be a little bit of both, that we will try to support his organization, but also trying to bring more opportunities into the area.
And who in your organization would be involved in that part of it? Or who will be driving this train?
The Community Redevelopment Agency.
Okay.
All right, now we go to the next slide. Housing availability. That covers 8 strategies, including a program to provide rental assistance to cost-burdened households to prevent their displacement. Other strategies include providing financial assistance to low-income residents for improvements to their home for life safety or to accommodate physical disabilities. Creating a program to support and educate residents on home ownership, and to create a grant program to incentivize the construction of affordable housing on vacant or infill lots. So any questions on housing availability?
Are you setting up a timeline? Goals
Yes,
and
on the
objectives?
chart that's in the plan, it goes from 2023 to 2028 plus. So we have the first 5 years program, but if you'll see an X in 2028 plus, it means it's going to be ongoing or projected farther out in the 20-year program. Okay, quality of life. That covers 13 strategies, and there are several that support expanding existing history or cultural programs or institutions in the North Greenwood area. Also increasing access to our recreational facilities outside of the standard operating hours. Working with local healthcare providers to develop strategies to improve our public health outcomes, and to support organizations that provide adult mental health and wellness programs. Any questions about quality of life? All right, our last goal area is invest in youth, and has 10 strategies, including increased programming for our after-school and summer activities, both through public and private organizations. Addressing child poverty through assistance for low-income households to ensure adequate access to food, technology, and transportation. Work with our partners to provide youth job readiness and workforce development. Support increased child care and childhood education, and support for organizations that provide youth mental health and wellness programs. Any questions on our youth? All right, so that covers all of the strategies and where the funding will go. And now we'll look at the governance. The governance is where we have the required items of the plan, like we have auditing requirements, reporting requirements, the authority of the city council, as well as our CRA trustees. The county actually requires us to create a citizens advisory committee. And so with that, we are proposing a 5-member committee with a hybrid approach where we would have 3 members of those elected by the property owners of North Greenwood and 2 members appointed by city council. Additionally, those members are proposed to receive a stipend for their time and service on the committee, and the committee would be responsible for making recommendations to the CRA trustees regarding the CRA plan. Are there any questions on governance?
Is there any qualifications listed with that council at all?
Not at this point. All right, our appendices. We're required to have a legal description in there, so that's our Appendix A, which will actually describe the metes and bounds of the CRA boundaries. Appendix B is the CRA local assessment, and this is really what determines what eligible tax increment you would have. Pinellas County has 12 factors they use to assess the CRA to get a baseline understanding of the needs and how it aligns with their 3 priority areas. So using those factors, the city had a consultant, VHB, determine that the North Greenwood area scored 78 points of that, on that scoring, and that designates us as an urban revitalization area, which makes it eligible for the 95%. So the county will reevaluate that as they go through the process to ensure that everything's still in alignment and we have the same amount of points. So Appendix C, that is the full tax increment projections. In the plan, we only have the 5 years. The Appendix C is actually the year over year, so you can see each year what the projection is. And then Appendix D is a requirement of the CRA, is to have a neighborhood impact assessment, and it's required if the redevelopment plan contains low or moderate income housing. So the statute requires that 6 elements are evaluated as part of this. That includes relocation, traffic circulation, environmental quality, availability of community facilities and services, effects on school population, and other items affecting the physical and social quality of the neighborhood. And so we did this assessment and found that the plan would not have a detrimental impact on any of those listed. So are there any questions on our appendices? All right, last thing is our approval timeline. So we have 2 approvals, the CRA plan itself, which lays out the strategies for the redevelopment area, and then the trust fund, which is where the TIF revenues will go and be held until they're expended. Now, the trust fund only needs to be approved by City Council, whereas the plan will go to the Community Development Board and the CRA trustees for recommendation to City Council. So the CRA plan is before you today for your recommendation, which will be forwarded to the City Council, and it will be reviewed by the Community Redevelopment Agency trustees on January 9th, and their recommendation will also be forwarded to City Council. The plan and the trust fund will be presented to City Council during their work session on January 9th for discussion. The CRA plan could receive final approval from City Council at their January 12th meeting, and then the trust fund is actually adopted by ordinance, so it will take 2 council meetings for it to be adopted. So the second reading and approval of the trust fund will be scheduled for February the 2nd. And then once the city is approved with it, we then have to send it on to Pinellas County for their review and approval, and that is anticipated for April or May of 2023. So with that, are there any other questions you have about this plan?
Sounds really ambitious, but it sounds really like a nice overall plan.
We really appreciate the presentation. That was very helpful.
Very detailed.
I'd like to make a comment, too, that I had the pleasure of attending 2 of these meetings with the community. And I'm really impressed with the city staff and the way the city staff has incorporated many of the things, suggestions and ideas I heard from the folks that live and working over in this new CRA. Most of, predominant concerns I heard over and over again were addressed very well in this plan, and thank the staff for, number one, publicly engaging the community like you did to make sure this works for that neighborhood, because that's the most important thing, is that this contributes to the success of the neighborhood as the folks in that neighborhood want it to be successful. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Yes. I know there are members of the Clearwater Urban Coalition here that also served on our steering committee. Thank them for all of their hard work.
Thank you.
I know they've been working on this a long time.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
Community.
I will say that, being a community member myself and leadership of the area, that it takes people like yourself to make things like this happen and to push the envelope and to work with the city and to do that thoughtfulness. So that is most important. Thank you.
It's such a unique and important part of the city. It really is. There's nothing else like it in the city of Clearwater. It's a very special area.
Yes. Yeah.
This is I think there's a required public hearing here, so, and we would need to vote after you have your public hearing.
Yeah, this isn't a level 3 hearing
Right.
under the land development code, but it's a legislative matter wherein staff is asking for your recommendation to city council on the resolution. So I would suggest that you handle it just like a level 3.
All right.
You've already had your presentation from your applicant, who is also the planning staff, so with this.
So we would want to invite any members of the public to address this.
Right.
Is there anyone here present who would like to come forward and to address this proposed plan? We'd be happy to hear from you. state your name, please, and spell it for the clerk.
Sure. Gloria Campbell, Campbell. And I act as the highly paid executive director of the Clearwater Urban Leadership Coalition. And they also gave me a raise this year, 0%. I'm making 100% of 0% now. But what I did want to say is to, first of all, thank certainly the staff of the city. This has been a 3.5-year road. We did not get here by accident. It was intentional. And I think the members of the Clearwater Urban Leadership Coalition that continued to press forward, even when we weren't sure whether it would actually happen. So today for us is monumental. We thank the number of committee members who have been working with us. Mike Flannery was one of the first people we contacted to talk about could this happen and would he support it. So we really want to publicly thank you for that as well. Also, I do want to point out, I always love to give credit where credit is due. A lot of what you see in the CRA plan came from the community. When we did our outreach, when we did our plan, putting things together, when we surveyed the community, this is not what we thought, this is what the community said we wanted and they needed. And I am a big advocate that believes that there's nobody who can do it better or make the change than the people that are affected by it. And so this is what we're going to see. We are looking forward to this being very exciting. I do also want to publicly thank our city manager, John Jennings, for giving us the Jump Start money. We asked for $2 million, and he put $5 million. I recommended $5 million of the ARPA funds, and of which we now have $2.3 million available today. We are doing applications now to make sure that this gets done. So that, I just wanted to say that, and thank you, and we are looking forward to setting the example. The bar is high for us, and really making this North Greenwood CRA an example that can be used throughout the county and also throughout the country. Thank you very much.
Anyone else that would like to comment? All right, thank you. At that, we should,
Any kind of closing statement?
all right. Would you like to make some kind of closing remarks, or are you, all right?
Talk enough.
That's fine.
Yeah, I just want to thank, as you stated, on something like this, I know there's a lot of time and effort put into this that doesn't get, heard. But, I mean, the staff is, as I've stated before, I think our staff is phenomenal, and it sounds like they heard you. And I want to thank them for the time and the effort that they put into it. But on something like this, to be successful, it's just not coming in front of city council. It's just not the staff implementing, and we have this procedure. I know that it's going to be y'all in the field, in the community, that makes this successful. And I want to thank you guys for all the work that you've done and all the work you're going to do on it, because, yeah, I support this totally.
It's not over yet.
Sure, go ahead.
As a level 3?
Yep.
And no, it's not a level 3, it's the
Take it.
redevelopment.
If you're in favor, you would simply move to recommend approval to the city council of resolution 23-01.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion for approval of resolution 23-01 as a recommendation for approval to the city council.
Is there a
I
second?
second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Congratulations. Ms. Clayton, do you have anything else
I
for
have
us
nothing
today?
else, just want to wish everyone a happy holiday, and thank you for all the work that you do all year long for the citizens of Clearwater. So,
Thank you.
And the same to all of you. Wonderful holiday and a very blessed and happy new year.
Happy New Year, everybody.
All right. This meeting is adjourned at 1:49.
Okay.
Good job, Mary.
Yeah, nice job.